ভাষা জানা নাই, মোদের নিজের ভাষা ভিন্ন আর ভাষা জানা নাই। মহারাজা রাজা মশাই তবে জানা আছে ভাষা অন্য, তোমাদের শুনাইয়ে ধন্য। জানা আছে ভাষা অন্য, তোমাদের শুনাইয়ে ধন্য। এসেছি তাহারি জন্য রাজা মহারাজ। মোরা সেই ভাষাতেই করি গান, মোরা সেই ভাষাতেই করি গান। রাজা শোনো ভোরে মন প্রাণ, রাজা শোনো ভোরে মন প্রাণ। মোরা সেই ভাষাতেই করি গান, রাজা শোনো ভোরে মন প্রাণ। এই যে সুরেরই ভাষা ছন্দেরই ভাষা, সুরেরই ভাষা ছন্দেরই ভাষা, তালেরই ভাষা আনন্দেরই ভাষা, সুরেরই ভাষা তালেরই ভাষা আনন্দেরই বলে বোঝের সকলে। উঁচা নিচা ছোট বড় সমান, রাজা উঁচা নিচা ছোট বড় সমান। মোরা এই ভাষাতেই করি গান, মোরা এই ভাষাতেই করি গান। নমস্কার।
Thank you also, Prabha. Okay, so now we all know that our country landmark changes, and the education sector in no exception. The National Education Policy 2020 has been hailed as a paradigm shift. We have a distinguished speaker who will address some elements of the fast transforming landscape of higher education in India. National Education 2020. Dr. Shoti Matra is an assistant professor of English at Gurudas College, University of Calcutta. He is a researcher in book history and history of reading. Has been the recipient of the 2022 Society for the History of Authorship, Reading and Publishing Research Development Grant. Policy making in higher education in India and abroad is one of her particular interests. Please welcome Dr. Shoti Matra.
A very good evening to all of you. Is this still an echo, right? Echo হচ্ছে না? ঠিক আছে, ঠিক আছে। আমি বোধহয় একটা কিছু echo শুনতে পাচ্ছি। হ্যাঁ, এটা বেটার। এরকমভাবে মাইক ধরে কথা বলার আসলে একদম অভ্যাস নেই, ক্লাসে আর কি মাইক ইউজ করে। যাই হোক, I'll speak in English. I'll try not to be exclusive in the discussion about inclusive education. So first and foremost, I must thank the ISI Research Scholars Forum for inviting me here, and especially and bringing me here, and also directed me throughout the way, because I was like, etc. There was a lot of conversation before this. So I'm very grateful, and also for getting me to the museum and letting me see the dinosaurs, which I was very excited about. So thank you for all of this. I'm very glad that you're still sitting here and listening to me drone on about the national education policy. Now what I'm going to do is, again, let's understand one thing. Discussing the national education policy in itself is a humongous task that would probably require a separate course involving a couple of 3 months and a considerable number of policy documents. We're not going to do that. The National Education Policy's draft was published in 2019 was a 480-page PDF document which had been put up for public consultation. Now, I had the misfortune of reading that 480-page document. I would not like anybody to do that under, they're really interested in policy. The current document as it exists is a 55-page document, which is somewhat more accessible. But again, there are vast parts of it which I'm absolutely keen on. For example, he talks a lot about school education, which frankly I know nothing about. So therefore, for me to comment on elements of school education or what the national education policy is would be a completely mistaken attempt. I don't know anything. I'm not going to talk about any of that. My interest is in higher education in particular. And even there, of course, the discussion is long enough. There are elements that I'm not going to be able to touch upon. But what I'm interested in, I think, and what I hope to also get across to you in howsoever brief way possible, because I know I think a lot of us as academics don't necessarily engage with policy. I know when I was a research scholar, sure, I went on a lot of protests. I went on the 2012 protest at India Gate. We got lathi charged and all. So this stuff we did. Sure, we protested against a lot of other things as well. But I certainly had no time or interest in reading policy documents, which can often come across as rather obscure and obtusely written. It is the language of babus sitting in Delhi offering some jargon which doesn't always make sense to us. So of course we have our own jargon, so we should be very clear about that. When we judge babus for jargon, we also write in jargon. So there is that. But furthermore, frankly, who had that? I spent most of my time either teaching archives and time that I had to spare was mostly either spent in sleeping or maybe trying to write my PhD. I didn't have time for all this. But nonetheless, starting as I was as I was in working as an ad hoc faculty in the University of Delhi, I managed to witness a series of transformations in the education sector firsthand, mostly because I was working as a contractual worker, an ad hoc faculty is a contractual worker. We used to be given 4-month contracts, 4-month contracts, which are you are given a day's break, after which you may or may not be renewed. Now, I somehow managed to be renewed consistently for about 6 years. I don't know how. Or I also don't know how I survived those 6 years of work. But, and in that time, the University of Delhi switched from the annual mode to the semester mode. From the semester mode, it switched to the 4-year program. From the 4-year program, it switched back to the semester mode. Then from the semester mode, it went again on to the CBCS. So in this 6-year period that I spent there were 5 of these changes, this restructuring that Delhi University was at the heart of. So even if I wasn't really interested in policy, I had other things to do, I had classes to teach. The policy was interested in me. Policy was very interested in me and making sure that I worked in that 4-month job without any perks, without any leave. I once asked for a conference leave. I wanted to leave for a conference abroad, and I was told we cannot give it to you. Take a leave without pay. So this sort of a thing was extremely. And again, I was a research scholar. Again, we were talking about. I had a JRF at that point of time. Now this is a long time ago. We used to be paid that the UGC JRF back in the days was 12,000 rupees, which would be paid at around say about 5 months, 6 months if you were lucky. So it was paid. This is true. But in that case, you might die without money. So that's why I started working in the first place. So again, as I said, even though I wasn't interested in policy, policy was interested in me, and policy was affecting every element of my life as a research scholar, as a budding academic who was trying to teach at the University of Delhi. And that's how I sort of developed an interest. And I ended up with very dull policy and in Babujan. When we talk about the national education policy today, I am, of course, not going to comment on the vastness of it, or neither am I going to necessarily talk about it in terms of yes or no, as in yes, it should exist, it's a wonderful thing, no, it shouldn't exist, it's terrible. I could pursue that, but that's not my intention here because I'm here talking to research scholars. And I think in order to engage with anything, as this is what we do, we have to engage, even though I know nothing about the kind of things you do. I mean, I am exactly the opposite of, I know nothing about mathematics. I was listening to the previous discussion and thinking, oh my God, This is exactly my maths class experiences. I scored 44 in physics. This is not a conversation I should even be a part of. Why am I here? So that's what I was thinking about. But anyway, to come back to the point, so yes, I don't know what you do, but I think a certain area where all of us can come together and engage with a few of the things that are being done to us, even if we don't necessarily want to talk about it, even if it doesn't necessarily think that it would be okay if we can just, sit in the lab and focus on our work. सब कुछ ठीक हो जाएगा, एक नौकरी तो मिल जाएगा, नहीं तो एक postdoc तो मिल जाएगा. That's how we normally approach things, because that's how research scholars think. But unfortunately, this is something that we are not necessarily something that we can often get away with. And again, I'm not asking you to necessarily pour over the policy documents the way some of us tend to do, but I think it demands a lot more engagement from all of us, regardless of the kind of work that we do. Now, when I again, when a few days ago, one of the ministers was talking a perfectly innocuous talk about the national education policy. He was talking, I think, in the context of school education again. Now, it was a completely innocuous discussion, the kind of jargon that and babus and people writing in op-eds in newspapers use every single day. So he was talking about make India a global knowledge superpower. Now, that sounds so nice. That imagine a global knowledge superpower. We'll have so much knowledge that will be a superpower. Everybody will come to us to learn. Sure, that's magnificent, I guess. Following this, on that very same day, I ended up reading this op-ed in Indian Express, where the speakers were again, talking about knowledge economy. We must make India a knowledge economy. And for that, they were proposing that universities, especially public, it's not quite a university, but it is very definitely a public run institution. So we'll have to become service providers so that we can, sort of like, say, Vodafone. Vodafone is a bad example. Airtel. We have to become, and we have to ensure that we are ready to become a knowledge economy. You heard this phrase, right? Knowledge economy. শুনেছো? খবর কাগজে পড়েছো মাঝে মাঝে? লোকজন বলেন যে, শুনেছো নিশ্চয়ই? Right. Do you know what is the meaning of a knowledge economy? Here's the thing, neither do I. What happened is that, so after reading this, I was like, I should look it up because people talk about it so often. And they are saying that the national education policy will make us a global superpower, which will make us a knowledge economy. So I should know what a knowledge economy is. I do have a PhD, albeit in a completely different field. But one should know. So I looked it up and I will briefly use this phone to read out a small definition for you. A knowledge economy is apparently an economic system in which the production of goods and services is based principally on knowledge-intensive activities that contribute to advancement in technical and scientific evolution. It relies on a crucial role of intangible assets within the organization settings in facilitating modern economic growth. It features a highly skilled workforce with macroeconomic and microeconomic environment, institutions and industries that create jobs that demand specialized skills in order to meet the global market needs. Knowledge is somehow, and this is the part where I gave up, knowledge is somehow an additional input to labor and capital. So did you know that knowledge was separate from labor? In all the days that you spend in your laboratories, sweating over whatever it is that you are working on currently. And I know you guys especially spend a lot more time in your laboratory than we have ever had to do. So did you know that the kind of work that you did without sleeping at night, wrecking your bodies, wrecking your systems, there's actually no labor involved here, it's just knowledge? And neither did I know that it was possible to have any form of economic formation where
কালার ইস্যু দেয়নি না আমি বলছি কালার ইস্যুটা তোমাদের ওটা মানে টার্মস এন্ড কন্ডিশনের মধ্যে পড়ে কিনা সেটা বলো
Well, I put this on. But anyway, to get back to the point. So if everything is knowledge intensive, if everything is, well, what it is appear to be suggesting is that we want more an economy that has more white collar jobs. Well, that's very nice. but you will still require other forms of labor. And the idea that somehow knowledge is external to labor, the thinking is external to labor, is in itself a very problematic proposition. That thinking is not work, knowledge is not work. Does that mean that we don't need to get paid for that work? If it is not labor, is that why your stipends are so low? These are questions we need to be asking, right? But the real answer to this is that the reason why it doesn't make sense is because the entire thing is jargon. It is jargon based on a certain idea. Now, I further looked up, this is the World Bank telling us what a knowledge economy is. And apparently, in order to become a knowledge economy, there are four pillars, like the pillars outside. Education and training. Nobody is opposed to education and training. It needs an information infrastructure. And again, who is objecting to an information infrastructure? That's what libraries and internet connections are for, right? Economic incentive and institutional regime. A regulatory and economic environment that enables the free flow of knowledge. Again, none of us are ever objected to the free flow of knowledge. On the contrary, it would be nice if we were able to access journals without having to pay so much money. But yet they keep blocking. Did you notice that they blocked Zedlib a few days ago? I did. The minutes are available, but they keep blocking them. What sort of free flow of knowledge is this? And you need innovation systems, which are a network of research centers, universities, think tanks, and private enterprises that will tap into the growing stock of global knowledge, assimilate and adapt it to local needs, and create new knowledge. Again, that sounds like the kind of thing universities already do. Right? We try at least to our level best to produce new knowledge. Why does it require the World Bank to produce 4 new pillars and tell us the things that we already know? That we need infrastructure, that knowledge is good, that you need a structure where these forms of education can be accessible, that yes, more white collar jobs are not a bad thing. It will produce a middle class. Why do we need them to tell us all this? Why do they need to do all this in the first place? And the answer to that lies, perhaps, and that's what we perhaps need to understand, why this conversation keeps popping up around the national education policy, why it is offered to us as this, in Bengali we say Mushkil Ashan Dada. So this is the miracle pill, the Mushkil Ashan Dada, the solution to all our problems, everything that ails Indian education system. The reason why it is sold in this manner, the reason why it is proposed in this manner, because what it offers is in fact a set of justifications for a process that has been underway for the last 20 years or so. The faculty here at least are familiar with this process. The research scholars may not be, but the faculty here are familiar with this process of what is called restructuring, or what is often nicely promoted as reform. Reform is a very nice word, I like it. Because the moment we say reform, you feel like, okay, I am Vishwachandra Vidyashankar. Because I am reforming education. It's a very nice word, it has a certain value addition to it. So when you say that we need educational reforms, you say, yes, we need reforms. Because after all, we aren't producing enough employment. Are we not? Right? We aren't. Our education system isn't inclusive enough. We are still a caste-ridden society. We are still a society with deep inequality. So under those circumstances, yes, absolutely, we do need reforms. But here is where again these narratives now come into place and policy begins to shape around them. And these currents, these narratives are not merely national currents. This is also something we must understand. For example, are you familiar? You must be, because when I was talking to Shankar the other day, and I said that I asked him, so have you guys ever done that? And he said, no, we don't have to do it here. You don't, but you do. You are familiar with the QS rankings, right? Has an ISI featured in it recently? Or there was some talk about it in 2018 or 19. I think the ISI from data was featured somewhere. There were also conversations about how else we can push these institutions into these ranking structures, etc. And again, now you can ask me that what does the national education policy have to do with it? The answer to this is everything. The rankings themselves are a part of a global process where, and again, we are not alone here. It is a global process where the education system, the university itself has been reimagined. The purpose of education itself and what the university is supposed to do itself has been reimagined. For example, the rankings, the QS rankings, the THE rankings that we are now told that we must follow, because otherwise, if we are giving the newspaper, we read it. Why are so few universities a part of it? Wow, IISc has made it, but what about everybody else? So it's sort of like this competition, right? It's like the Premier League. Why isn't Liverpool playing well this year? That sort of a thing that you hear. It's the same way that they cover it. Like, look at the language. Look at the language. X has dropped, Y has ranked, ABCD has done so well. Are we talking about universities or football clubs? Is this the IPL? Why are we talking about universities like this at all? And the answer to this is it lies in the fact that in the early 2000s, initially China came up with this bright idea, China's Jiaotong University, came up with this bright idea of ranking their universities so that there would be competition, so that they could compete again, as Professor Chakraborty was talking about earlier, with the white countries, so that because China was expanding into what they wanted more soft power. Following this, you had the British in the meantime were trying to figure out what are we going to do to make our universities more industry friendly. And they said, let's make a league table. This was the language, league table, like a football league. And this league table would have rankings. The government wouldn't do it. It was to be done by private institutions. So who came forward? This organization called QS, Paparelli Simons, which used to be involved in placement related services. And the Times Higher Education Literary Supplement. It's literally a magazine that comes up and that says, let's rank universities. Hey, why are they so interested in ranking universities? Creating a league table. They invest so much money in it. Thomson Reuters invests so much money in it. Elsevier invests so much money in it. And the question in the THE, which would become THE Global later, was sold to a private equity company for $400 million in 2018. It has recently changed hands again. So we need to be asking, why are these guys spending so much money just to rank our university? Aren't they so nice? That we must follow the trend of money, right? And the answer to that lies is that these guys figured out that universities are at the end of the day a very old-fashioned entity, which has a lot of elements, a lot of aspects which are not monetized in that particular sense. And it is this monetization that you can work on. For example, you take data from universities and then you sell back an analytical tool to the same university saying, look, you need to do your benchmarking better. Elsevier incidentally, though an academic publisher historically, now calls itself an analytics company. You can take it out in its website. They don't call themselves an academic publisher anymore. That's how much money they have made. So this entire ranking process, which involves a lot of movement of money, mining data for free from universities and then selling it back to them, so that universities can now compete. It begins partly in China, partly in Britain, spreads everywhere in the world. Newer markets are found, Latin America, Asia, emerging economics, BRICS. These ranking structures come to all over the world, and the universities are told that you must compete. And again, we might ask that why should we compete? We are universities, this is not a football league. But this is precisely the logic of the market, where the universities must necessarily compete. Now, you might still ask me, you still haven't come to the NEP, right? What does any of this have to do with the NEP? And again, my answer to that is everything. You see, that NEP should not be understood simply as a policy document. India has had national education policies before, all of them pretty important. One in the 1940s, one later in 1986, which was amended with in 1992 with the program of action. And please note the date. At least people who are closer to me in age and older will know the significance of the date 1992. This is shortly after liberalization. Right. In 1995, we signed the GATS, So all of this is taking place. And again, already if you look at this point of time, you have for instance, the previous education policy was the education policy that pushed for technical education and the rise of what we see at the engineering colleges today. But I'll not go there. I don't. So, but that was 92. And education policy was indeed long overdue. Well, there's no doubt about that. That the government would eventually have to produce a policy document for the 21st century is undoubted. But what emerged in the national education policy is perhaps a reflection less of a policy making process that is seeking to be inclusive in any way that we understand, but rather a policy document that is thoroughly steeped in the kind of global currents that I have been talking about, the currents that ask universities to ensure that they are competing with each other and ensure that they have sufficient data to offer to the analytics companies, that they have a sufficient set of metrics that can then be measured. And again, this too is something that even if we consider something as simple as citation metrics, that I think that I think you're not familiar with, right? Citation metrics, everybody knows what citation metrics are. But can citation metrics, I mean, leaving aside, I mean, if I may ask a very banal question, do citation metrics necessarily speak of quality? They do not. They cannot. But if you look at the ranking systems, say the QS or the THE, they prioritize among this. So, for instance, King Abdulaziz University of Saudi Arabia paid a lot of Nobel laureates a huge amount of money to offer them a second contract. Why? So that they could claim their citation metrics and ensure that they did well in the ranking. So, under these circumstances, these are the global currents that we are dealing with. And it is these currents that you see reflected in many ways in the national education policy. See, right alongside the national education policy, which was published in 2020, alongside we saw another series of developments. For example, in 2017, the government of India instituted something called the Institutes of Eminence Act. This was originally called the World Class Universities. Then they renamed this as the Institutions of Eminence. IIT Bombay, for instance, qualified as an institution of eminence. So we were told that they would be given a thumb. Now, why were they done? This is very simple. The government realized that, and India is not the only country that has done this again. The government handpicked a few winners. Saying that, look, these guys can do well in the ranking system. So let's sort of push them forward. Let's push them forward. But meanwhile, let's take these guys and push them forward. So far so good. They would be given 1,000 rupees, 1,000 crore rupees corpus. Not a bad amount if you think about it. But then came, and this is what the Universities of Eminence Act says, that these universities should, when they become institutes of eminence, they can create their own fee structure. They have complete autonomy when it comes to their fee structure, because they should be able to raise money wherever they want to from. And of course, that means student fees. The national education policy says very clearly that we must move away from a subsidized model. It doesn't use this word, but that's what it is proposing. That instead of a subsidized model of education that is affordable, it's proposing need-based scholarships. And the rest of it, what does it say? The rest of it is to be education loans. Curiously, this is something that was proposed in 2001 by a policy report that when mysterious fee is no longer available online, it was known as we call it the Ambani-Birla report. It is a report commissioned by the government at that point of time. It is a Ambani-Birla report on higher education, where these august educationists, Mr. Birla and Mr. Ambani, propose the deregulation of higher education sector in order to ensure that it becomes a place where people come to operate under the user pays principle. Exact words I'm quoting, user pays. User pays money. What does it mean, user pays? It means that you are the user and you pay. don't ask for stipends. Maybe research scholars might get stipends. Need-based scholarships might exist, but user pays. Loans will be available for you in the market, but it has to be the user pays model. I think that which comes to us, I mean, it has been systematically introduced. What the national education policy does, along with a slew of other policy things. If you have been following the a higher education sector in the last few years, it's been a flurry of policy documents, one after the other. 2020, they come up with the policy on science, technology, and innovation, same time as the national education policy. The two of them have to be read together, preferably by scholars of science. It's also the time that they create in 2017, they create the institutions of eminence. Following that, we have something called the NIRF rankings. Again, not something that the ISI participates in, but any other university now, you read about this in the newspapers, right? And you have this conversation, oh, why aren't these universities doing well? You know how the NIRF is measured? It's the addition of number of faculty, student teacher ratio, publication data, and some shadowy criteria called peer perception from the market and from other institutions. So again, so if an older university has more faculty, it's automatically going to be ranked higher than a newer university. So, but that's how it works. And the way it is reported is also that this is it. This is it. It especially comes to us in that manner, because perhaps inside the ISI, this is not something you need to compete for. But come to Calcutta University, come to Stanford University, you will see that there's a life or death itself. Why did they introduce it in the first place? In order to make sure that the ones that are not qualifying for QS right now, that they need to be competitive enough. They should get into the habit of competing. Right? And again, there is a proposition. This was not even this is again echoing. There was something called the TSR Subramanian Committee report. Okay, I'm not asking you to read all this, not remember the names of these. But the committee report, which informed the education policy, says the same thing. You see, with an institution that has the highest quality, the highest ranked institutions, the NIRF rank, the highest NAC rated institutions, we will grant them complete financial autonomy, Purna Swaraj. So you can you can raise money howsoever you want, you can keep money howsoever you want, and under those circumstances, we are not going to comment on the fee structure. All we ask is that you maintain your quality. So rankings में ठीक ठाक करना, तो फिर जहाँ से भी पैसा ले लो, we don't care. It's actually very interesting. So you are saying the best institutions are going to be set free financially. So where will all this money come from? Again, the money will come from the user who pays, because that is something we have already been told in policy thinking about 20 years ago now. And what is the national education policy? That I just focus on this one little element. The national education policy is doing a lot of things. But what the national education policy does is very simply, it gives voice to, it's you can say it sums up the kind of policy thinking that has been going on, not just in this country, but worldwide for the past 2-3 decades. And it takes it in a certain direction where the question of inclusion becomes extremely problematic, at least to me. Because if we are proposing that the best rated universities, the so-called best, whatever the criteria might be, that the best universities must necessarily also be the most expensive. If we are proposing that we have to set these institutions free, I like the idea of freedom. Dealing with the government is a nightmare. I know you have to deal with it also. Getting the babus to release even the smallest of funds, which is right there, sitting there, allocated, will not come. It's a nightmare. So we often think, yes, it would be nice. Wouldn't it be nice to be free of the Calcutta University? I know all of my colleagues will agree. But again, what is the price of this Purna Swaraj? The price of the Purna Swaraj appears to be a principle that keeps scholars and students as users, and that the knowledge that they produce. But this again, we started with the global knowledge economy. The global knowledge superpower seems to be a destination then, where you come either with a lot of money or a loan document, and you ensure that you are a customer at a university where you are buying knowledge that can be, again, I am using very generic words here. I could be a lot more precise and nuanced, but I think these are certain ideas that we need to understand, because I'm not proposing that there is necessarily a way to stem this tide, but we must understand what we are dealing with. We must understand why our stipends disappear. We must understand why fee hikes are protested at every university at every single semester, because that has been enshrined in policy. And sooner or later, it will come at our homes. There is no escaping it. Because that is policy, and that has been the policy current. This morning, I read in Ahmedabad Patrika that education, it's come back again, the data of education loans this year. And again, NPAs have risen. That goes without saying. That goes without saying that NPAs have risen, because we are not producing enough employment. So how will people pay back their education loans? So under these circumstances, we are hurtling towards a model of a knowledge economy that appears to be producing via a slew of policy documents that will ensure that we operate under a user pays principle in order to be global, because those are apparently the global standards. So therefore, if we are to stand in the same rank as the other global places, whatever they might be, this is apparently something we have to do. And I think this is something that troubles me greatly, because at the same breath we talk about inclusive education, and at the same breath we propose that we saddle the future generation with a mandatory set of education loans. That, I think, is something that we need to be engaging with. And I'll end here. I have one final thing to say, because I forgot to say this earlier, with regards to the global currents. In 2005 and 2001 first, then 2005, India went and proposed and offered higher education as a commodity to the World Trade Organization under the GATS. Now, nobody knows what is the status of that, because India has been fighting with the WTO.
When did it sign that document?
First, no, the offer has been made, the commitment has not. Well, the offer is like, we propose. A commitment is like, we can't get out of it. Now, as I understand, a commitment has not been made yet. The commitment is apparently an unbreakable bond of some sort. That has not been made. So first, the Vajpayee government made an offer in 2001. That had to be restructured because apparently the language wasn't the same. Something to do with the with Babu language. So in 2005, the next government went back with the same proposal and offered higher education as a tradable commodity. And since then, India, this has not moved forward. Because as I understand, India has been fighting with the WTA about subsidies, especially in agriculture. So because we have been fighting that, for instance, during the 2015 round in Nairobi, this was something that everybody was very worried about. That are we going to finally have that commitment? But it turned out India was still fighting about agriculture subsidies. So, but there is so much silence on this, and so little policy document available in the public domain that very few people know about this, let alone what it will entail to offer. But yes, it has been offered to the World Trade Organization as a tradable commodity. Now, when WTO first made it possible to make these offers, a lot of countries protested, saying, how can you make education a tradable commodity in the first place? But they went ahead with it anyway. And India, along with the United States, was one of the countries that made this offer. Again, I don't know what has come of it. But what I wanted to get across in this slightly haphazard discussion, because talking about the NEP is often very haphazard, is that we always hear that the NEP has come, the NEP will be implemented. We hear about it in superlative terms. It's for holistic education. It's for a new future. It will take us to a global economic destination, or it will make us a global knowledge economy. It is very important to us, whichever discipline we are in, to engage somewhat with what policy is doing. Because policy is literally setting fire in our houses and then saying, So even when it is not setting us on fire, even then, it's something that affects our lives very directly. So be it as scholars, be it as academics, in tenured or untenured positions, I think it goes without saying that these are things that we will have to engage with. I, for one, look forward for that somebody who actually understands science, technology, and innovation will read the science, technology, and innovation policy with the national education policy and explain what's going on to people like us who don't necessarily get what this entails. So that's really what I wanted to say here. Perhaps I have gone on for too long, but no, I think I'm good till half an hour. But if you have questions, I'll be happy to listen. I hope I haven't bored you or put you to sleep too much.
Yeah, so one question I have, like point that's favor of raising the fees in the premium institute is like when you see like 95% of the students, they are basically getting subsidized education probably from well-to-do families and like serving, let's say, Silicon Valley companies, right? So
will they not be paying taxes?
Sorry.
Will they not be paying taxes?
I mean, what's the rationale behind like subsidizing their education?
Because they'll be paying taxes.
Yeah.
They'll be paying taxes if they're in Silicon Valley. If they're not paying taxes in India, they'll be paying remittances. We are ensuring a global, the diasporic state, the cloud that we can claim today is courtesy the subsidy educated IITians and among others. And so therefore this entire idea, but I think that's one, but that's a more pragmatic point. I think we have to engage with a more fundamental. The more fundamental question is, why should education be expensive in the first place? Right? Regardless of who they are. And you are suggesting that if that person can afford to pay, then let them pay. Okay, I agree with you. But the question is, are we buying shoes? Am I buying shoes that I can afford Reebok and you can afford Khabib? So I'll go to Reebok and I'll go afford Khabib. This idea itself that purchasing power can determine where you go in an educational institution. That your purchasing power, that's what I've noticed, purchasing power, that determines how you will buy education. And I think is problematic. That is why a lot of people's sons end up in Harvard, for example, because they've got the city.
Sure. I mean, there is a quota for like some.
Yeah, I agree, but again, isn't that a fundamentally why is it? This is a fundamentally problematic proposition.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just saying that what's the problem? Like, there is opinions about this because why should they pay for like what the subsidized education for people? But I see your point that
Because we are investing, in the future.
Right. So you're saying more.
That guy will pay us back in their taxes and more.
That's not been guaranteed. I mean, they're paying taxes to fund the US military.
Maybe so. They might be end up being horrible individuals. They might end up becoming investment bankers, which is far worse.
Right.
But they might end up doing a lot of these things. They might end up having accounts in the Cayman Islands. We know all of this. But it's always a gamble that we are taking. Out of the 60 students in my class, not all of them, and I teach in a fairly poor college. So a lot of my students are first generation like that.
Sure.
So for them, I know that a lot of them are probably not necessarily going to be able to even get out of here and manage a white collar job. But why push for it anyway, right? That's the idea. That it has to be, purchasing power cannot determine your entry into a so-called premium institution.
Actually, we can put education tax,
think,
we can collect taxes from rich people.
We already pay cesses, don't we? The education cess, I think, is still being paid. এখন উঠে জানি তো বলতে না সে কবে থেকে সে যদি টাকাটা বলতে আমরা কেন পারি না
I think
First of all, I'm not against taxpayer funded education, but the blue collar worker can actually ask a question: why are they taking our money and spending it for someone else? If there are some two students pass out of class, one to some job like beautician or a blue collar job by his own will. He thought I don't want a college education, and someone wants to go to a private store. He can ask this question: why are this government taking my money and funding his education? That can be asked.
Very valid question, and let me answer this. This is actually a fundamental question that you have asked. Then why is the government spending my money on education. Now the question is, what does the government do? When the government, what is the government? The government is a service provider. We say a lot of things about her, my government, my bar, but that's not true, right? What the government is that it provides some public services to us. We have paying the government, basically public servant, the word we use. So I am paying the government, you are paying the government to do a job. Now what is that job? That job involves running the country in various ways. Now, where does the government generate money for this? For instance, if the government has to make roads, when the roads in front of my house have been horrible, yesterday they came and fixed it in a day. But like you can understand the kind of work they did if they fix it in one day. Okay. So when the roads are bad, we give money to the government, right? So the government has to fix it. Where does the government get the money from? They take it from us. So whatever the government does, the money that the government generates, it comes from us. It can come from me buying, the poorest person in the road. One example, when they are buying, say, a matchbox, 1 rupees, they are paying GST. The richest person, when they are paying their full income tax, they are also paying tax, right? And it's this money that the government uses. So when the government is now, we have to ask, and why is the government spending on education specifically? The government is spending specifically on education. It's because education and our is a rich food. For instance, we don't even spend, it was on 3 point something percent of the GDP. Since 1967, 80s, we have been promised it will be 6% of the GDP. It should at least be 10% of the GDP, if not more. But the government isn't spending. And why should the government be spending? Because education is investment. You invest in a person. If you have a society that is fundamentally poorly educated, it is a difficult to govern society in comparison to a highly educated society. You push for education so that you can perhaps produce a few more taxpayers, so that you can have that return again. That's why. The government has to spend it.
Okay, ma'am, speaking of the taxes, if you raise the taxes down, because the capital of the country will flow out of India. The industries will shift to Vietnam or Bangladesh. That's what they will do. So raise the tax too much.
No,
They'll just take the money and leave.
I'm not suggesting that we tax too much. I'm only suggesting that we tax enough.
Yeah, but a blue collar worker can still ask. Let someone pay for their education. We don't need to spend for it. The blue collar worker can say it.
Absolutely, they can. And because they have not been beneficiaries of that system, right? Because they didn't get that benefit.
So they may just be voluntarily. Someone is also voluntarily.
A blue collar worker doesn't pay income tax.
No, they also pay GST.
They of course pay.
And inflation too.
No, absolutely. But the problem is when you live in a society, any society, you have to pay for the upkeep of the society. Like you are, if you live in your house and you have to maintain that house. Similarly, if you have to maintain a society, now we may choose not to. We may choose to. Why do we not like, say, criminals? Because they are harming the society instead of ensuring the upkeep of the society. Remember the taxes. Now, what the blue collar worker can say is that why am I not getting the benefits? That's the right question to ask.
No, he may just by himself voluntarily. So many people do that even in USA.
Of
Not
course.
even go to college.
Then we must ask, where is the pay parity? In the USA, a plumber can live a life of great dignity.
Yeah, then he can ask the question, why is my money taken and spent on someone's education? The plumber in USA can also ask the same question.
Yes, they can. And the answer
becomes loan forgivable.
But it's not just someone else's education, isn't it? Even the road in front of your house is built on somebody else's money. Right? Every public service is built on somebody else's money. Whether or not we agree on it is a different matter. I hope I answered your question.
I have a question, ma'am. Actually, till now I have not gone through national education policy.
Very boring.
And you have already told that it has 480 pages, then I will not dare.
No, the current one is 55, 480 was the draft. Sadly, we had to read it, but
My question is there any benefit other than lower ranking?
no, that's the only one element I wanted to talk about. And again, benefits are really, it's a very difficult thing to say because
The national education policy is just sticking to higher education. The national education policy is proposing a C, or for instance, there are some things I like about the language of the policy. It's for the first time in my life, I am reading a government document that is saying that arts education is good. So yes, definitely I am very happy about this. You don't normally hear this, right? So for the first, it's a policy document that is, I think, to a small extent. There isn't a lot because this is my huge point of criticism. That it talks to a small extent about inclusion of what they call socioeconomically disadvantaged groups. So people from marginalized castes, people from marginalized sections, including women, disabled people. It's probably one of the first policy documents in the country that explicitly talks about disability. So yes, there are certainly some positive elements about it, but my questions remain is that if it is a document that is primarily meant to restructure and make education very expensive, or rather that process is already underway, then I have then we must engage with that element first. Because what is the point of talking about ACTGs or socioeconomically disadvantaged groups if you're basically saying that we are going to make education very expensive because it has to be global and global education is expensive. So under those circumstances, that's something that I must first engage with. That's why I am focusing on that. I hope you understand. Right. There are also some interesting elements in school education as well, but I'm not qualified.
ন্যাশনাল এডুকেশন পলিসি তো বলে দেশে এখন তিনটে, তাই তো? 60-এর দশক, 80-র দশক,
60-এর দশক, হ্যাঁ 86-92 আর এই 2000।
মানে এই তিনটেতে যদি আমরা দেখি আর কি, মানে কিরকম ভাবে চেঞ্জ হয়েছে, মানে হাউ দিস NEP 2020 is different from the previous?
ডেফিনেটলি প্রচুর চেঞ্জ হয়েছে। এবার আমি পুরো গল্পে যাবো না, কারণ তো অনেক লম্বা হয়ে যাবে, কিন্তু খুব এটা প্রশ্নটা খুব ভালো করেছেন, কারণ তিনটে ডকুমেন্ট যেন তিনটে হিস্টোরিক্যাল ডকুমেন্ট একদিক দিয়ে, এবং এক একটা সময়ে বাজারের কি কি প্রায়োরিটি সেটাও যেন এই তিনটে ডকুমেন্ট দেখলে বোঝা যায়। প্রথম যে শিক্ষা পলিসিটা, সেই শিক্ষা পলিসিটা আপনি অনেক ক্ষেত্রেই যদি দেখেন, সেটা মূলত একটা সদ্য স্বাধীন হওয়া দেশের তারা একটা ইনহেরিট করেছে এনাদের দৌলতে, যে শিক্ষা ব্যবস্থা তারা ইনহেরিট করেছে, সেই শিক্ষা ব্যবস্থাটা প্রাইমারিলি তৈরি হয়েছিল গ্লোবাল ইম্পিরিয়াল ইকোনমিটাকে কেটার করবার জন্য। তার সাথে বাই প্রোডাক্ট হিসেবে আমাদের পিতৃপুরুষেরা লেখাপড়া শিখেছেন, সেটা আলাদা বিষয়, কিন্তু ওটার প্রাইমারিলি নিডসটা ছিল গ্লোবাল ইম্পিরিয়াল ইকোনমির। সেই ইম্পিরিয়াল ইকোনমির কিছু ক্লার্কের দরকার ছিল, কিছু ICS এর দরকার ছিল ইত্যাদি, তাদের জন্য সেই সিস্টেমটা স্ট্রাকচার করা হয়। সেইটা যখন আপনার স্বাধীনতার পরে যখন সেটা ওনারা ইনহেরিট করছেন, তারা এমন একটা দেশকে পাচ্ছেন যেটার শিক্ষার হার ভয়াবহ, এনরোলমেন্ট রেশিওতে তো আমি গেলামই না, সাক্ষরতার হার একটা ভয়াবহ, দেশটির টাকা পয়সা কিছু নেই, এবং তাদের কাছে সেই কারণে সব থেকে বেশি জরুরি যে ব্যাপারটা হচ্ছে যে কি করে আমরা ইনফ্রাস্ট্রাকচারটা তৈরি করব, স্কুল কলেজগুলো তৈরি করব, করে যাতে আমরা মোটামুটি লোকজনদের পাঠাতে পারি। ধরুন পশ্চিমবঙ্গের অনুপাতে আমি যে জায়গাটায় পড়াই, এই কলেজগুলি তৈরি হয়েছিল 1956 ওই 50-এর দশকে, এবং এদের এক্সপ্লিসিট আইডিয়াটা ছিল এরকম 5টা কলেজ, ইনক্লুডিং আশুতোষ কলেজ, না আশুতোষী, ইফ আই এম নট মিস্টেকেন, এখানে পলিসিটাই ছিল যে রিফিউজিদের ছেলে মেয়েদেরকে পড়াতে হবে। তো সেই সময়ের দাবি হিসেবে এইটা উঠে আসছে। তো এইটা হচ্ছে তখনকার কথা। 86-92টা পার্টিকুলারলি ইন্টারেস্টিং, এবং আপনাদের প্রজন্মটা জানবেন, রিসার্চ স্কলাররা না জানলেও, যে 91-তে কি চেঞ্জটা হচ্ছে। আপনি 92-এর প্রোগ্রাম অফ অ্যাকশনটাতে যদি দেখেন, ওরা একটা ইন্টারেস্টিং কাজ করছে, সেটা হচ্ছে যে আপনি অলরেডি দেখতে পাবেন সেই সময় অলরেডি অন্ধ্র তামিলনাড়ুতে আনঅ্যাক্রেডিটেড যে পরিমাণ প্রাইভেট ইনস্টিটিউশন, সেগুলো অলরেডি হয়ে গেছে আপনার সেই যুগে, এবং তখন ওরা সেগুলোকে ইউজিসির ছাতার তলায় নিয়ে আসছে। কিন্তু আর যেটা করছে, সেখানে ওরা কিন্তু একটা পুশ করছে টুয়ার্ডস টেকনিক্যাল এডুকেশন। এই কথাটা বার করে বলা হচ্ছে। এটা কিছুটা মানে রাজীব গান্ধীর আন্ডারে সেই সরকারের যে প্রায়োরিটি গুলো, নরসিংহ রাও গভর্নমেন্টের যে প্রায়োরিটি গুলো, একটা টেকনিক্যাল এডুকেশনের স্ট্রাকচার তৈরি করা, যেটা আমরা ইভেন্চুয়ালি, আর এক্ষেত্রে শুধু IIT গুলোকে পয়সা দেওয়া নয়, IIT গুলো তো অলরেডি, কিন্তু এই পিরিয়ডটাতে খেয়াল করবেন IIT গুলো তো বহুকাল ধরেই ভালো কাজ করে আসছে, কিন্তু তাদের 90-এর দশকে হঠাৎ এই যে ব্র্যান্ড IIT-টা তৈরি হচ্ছে, সেই প্রোডাক্টটা তো আসছে আবার এই সময়কার টেকনিক্যাল এডুকেশন পুশ থেকে, এবং আরেকটা প্রজন্ম 70-এর একটা প্রজন্ম পরে আরেকটা প্রজন্ম যারা বিদেশে কাজ করতে যাচ্ছে। তাদের থ্রু দিয়ে এই ব্র্যান্ডটা তৈরি হচ্ছে। এবং টেকনিক্যাল এডুকেশনের সেই তারা বারবার বলছেন যে ভারতবর্ষে আমাদের এই ধরনের একটা স্কিলড ওয়ার্কফোর্স লাগবে। খুব সম্ভবত কিছুটা অ্যান্টিসিপেট করে এই যে গ্যাটস চুক্তির পরে কি প্রকারের কাজ ভারতবর্ষে আসতে চলেছে, এবং সেটার প্রতিফলন কিন্তু আমরা 86-92 এর পলিসিটায় পাই। তারপরে আবার আমরা যে এই পলিসিটায় আসছি, এই পলিসিটার ওই যে 480 পাতার যে ড্রাফটটা ছিল, সেটা শুরুতে একজন ভদ্রলোককে কোট করে, এটা ফাইনাল ড্রয়িং। সেই ভদ্রলোকের নাম ক্লজ শোয়াব। ক্লজ শোয়াব ওয়ার্ল্ড ইকোনমিক ফোরামের প্রেসিডেন্ট, ফাউন্ডার। ওয়ার্ল্ড ইকোনমিক ফোরাম কি? ওয়ার্ল্ড ইকোনমিক ফোরাম হচ্ছে পৃথিবীর 500টি ধনীতম সংস্থানের একটি ফোরাম। সেই ফোরামের ফাউন্ডারকে কোট করে ফোর্থ ইন্ডাস্ট্রিয়াল রেভলিউশনের জন্য আমাদের তৈরি হতে হবে, এই বলে পলিসি ডকুমেন্টটা লেখা হয়েছে।
এটা কোনটা
ড্রাফটটা, 19 ড্রাফটটা, ফাইনাল ডকুমেন্ট তো নয়, ড্রাফটটা। তো ডিডিএ নীতিতে তুমি এটা পাবে। তো সেই ক্ষেত্রে আই থিঙ্ক ওই দ্যাট ইজ সাফিসিয়েন্ট টু টেল আস। এবং এটা কিন্তু আবার যেটা আমার বক্তব্য যে এই যে এই 3টে পলিসি ডকুমেন্ট, এগুলো জরুরি নিশ্চয়ই, কারণ এগুলো এক ধরনের সামেশন, এটা এক ধরনের স্টেটমেন্ট, এক ধরনের ম্যানিফেস্টো। কিন্তু তার ভিতরে আসলে যে পলিসির কারেন্টটা আছে সেগুলো কিন্তু অনেক বছর ধরে ঘটছে। তো অনেক ক্ষেত্রেই ধরুন টিএসআর সুব্রমণিয়াম কমিটি রিপোর্ট করলে আপনি বুঝতে পারবেন এনইপিতে কি হচ্ছে। তো সেই কারেন্ট গুলো ধরতে পারাটাও একটু জরুরি, যদিও আমাদের সবসময় সময় হয় না। বাট ইয়েস, অ্যাবসলিউটলি মোটামুটি ফারাকটা হচ্ছে যে 3টে ডকুমেন্টের মধ্যেই আমরা দেখি যে একদিক দিয়ে আপনার লিপ সার্ভিস টু ইনক্লুসিভ এডুকেশন রয়েছে, বাট ইনক্রিজিংলি, এবং তৃতীয়টাতে তো মোটামুটি মানে ডাইরেক্টলি এই ইউজার পেস মডেলটার কথা বলা হচ্ছে। তো এটা মোরলেস আমাদের এই সময়কার যে রিস্ট্রাকচারিংটা আমরা ওভারঅল দেখছি, সেটারই একটা প্রতিফলন শিক্ষা পলিসির ডকুমেন্টও আমরা পাচ্ছি। আশা করছি উত্তর দিতে পেরেছি।
আমি বলছি যে কোঠারি কমিশনটা একটা ইন বিটুইন কোন একটা
হ্যাঁ, করেছিল তো। তারাই তো বলেছিল সেই 6% অফ জিডিপি, আজ অব্দি তো হলো না।
হ্যাঁ, সেটাই ওখানে তো
আরেকটা জিনিস আপনি মানে এটা ন্যাশনাল কারিকুলাম ফ্রেমওয়ার্ক 2005
ওটা তো আবার করছে নতুন করে।
হ্যাঁ, কিন্তু ওইটাকে কি আপনি একটু অ্যাবারেশন হিসেবে দেখেন, মানে এই 3টের থেকে?
না, আমি ন্যাশনাল কারিকুলার ফ্রেমওয়ার্কে এই জন্য চাইনি, কারণ ওটা প্রাইমারিলি যেহেতু স্কুল এডুকেশনের এলিমেন্টে চলে যাচ্ছি, একেবারেই আমার এক্সপার্টিস নেই ওই নিয়ে কথা বলবার। হ্যাঁ, যেমন মানে স্যার যখন বলছিলেন সুন্দর কথা, আমাদের তো ইংরেজি শিক্ষাও কিভাবে হয় জানি, তো ফ্র্যাঙ্কলি আমার যোগ্যতা নেই স্কুল শিক্ষা নিয়ে কথা বলা। ন্যাশনাল কারিকুলার ফ্রেমওয়ার্ক নিতে এই মুহূর্তে কনসালটেটিভ প্রসেসটা আবার চলছে, তো দে আর গোইং টু রিডু ইট अगेन। সেটা কি হচ্ছে আমি জানি না।
এমনি ওভার টাইম আপনার মনে হয় এটাকে যে এখন জানতো যে অন্য পড়াশোনার জন্য কেন টাকা দেবে, পোস্ট 92 হোল আইডিয়াটা হলো এডুকেশনটাকে সার্ভিস হিসেবে দেখা, না রাইটার।
হ্যাঁ, সেটাই তো, এই যে ফান্ডামেন্টাল, আমি ওদেরকে দোষ দেবো না, ওরা এই প্রশ্নগুলো করছে এই কারণেই, কারণ কি আমাদের আশেপাশের জগৎটা তো আমাকে এই প্রশ্নগুলোই করাচ্ছে না। এবার আমাকে যদি টিএসআর সুব্রমণিয়ান মারা গেছেন কদিন আগে, তার কমিটির রিপোর্ট বলছে যে কোয়ালিটি হলে, তুমি যদি কোয়ালিটি মেনটেন করতে পারো, তাহলে কিন্তু তোমাকে আমি অর্থনৈতিক স্বাধীনতা দেবো, ফাইন্যান্সিয়াল অটোনমি, পূর্ণ স্বরাজ। সেই পূর্ণ স্বরাজে তুমি চাও মাইনে বাড়াও না, কি এসে যায়? অর্থাৎ কিনা ইউ আর লিঙ্কিং প্রিমিয়াম এডুকেশন উইথ পারচেসিং পাওয়ার, এন্ড দ্যাট ইন ইটসেলফ, এটা যে পলিসিতে করা সম্ভব এবং মানুষ যেটা বিনা প্রতিবাদে মেনে নিচ্ছে, এটা কেন নিচ্ছে? কারণ আমরা তো অলরেডি নিজেরা লিঙ্ক করে নিয়েছি পারচেসিং পাওয়ারের সাথে যে শিক্ষা, সেটা তো আমরা লিঙ্ক করে নিয়েছি।
কিন্তু অলরেডি এই যে ধরুন কোটা ফ্যাক্টরি বা এই ধরনের জিনিসপত্রগুলো তো অলরেডি আছেই
একদম।
সেখানে।
আমার জীবনের খুব ঘনিষ্ঠ লোকজন এই নানান ফ্যাক্টরি গুলোতে কর্মরত। হ্যাঁ, স্কিউড, এবং স্কিউডটা কেন হয়েছে? কোটা ফ্যাক্টরি এক্সিস্ট করে কারণ সেটা ফর্মাল এডুকেশন সিস্টেমের কিছু ফ্ল ছিল, যেটাকে গ্যাপ করবার জন্য করেছে, তাই না? এরকম তো নয় ওটা আকাশ থেকে পড়েছে। ফর্মাল এডুকেশন সিস্টেমের কিছু ত্রুটি ছিল, এবং যেটা আপনার স্ট্যান্ডার্ডাইজ টেস্ট প্রত্যেকবার নগ্ন করে দেয়, সেই স্ট্যান্ডার্ডাইজ টেস্টিং কে উত্তর দিতে গিয়ে কোটা ইমার্জ অ্যাজ আ প্যারালাল ইন্ডাস্ট্রি, এবং সেই প্যারালাল ইকোনমিটা এখন আমাদেরকে গ্রাস করে নিয়েছে। আর আমরা বলছি এটা কেন হলো, কিন্তু করে তো নিয়েছে। আজ এতদিন আপনারা ছিলেন,
এখন প্যারালাল ইনফ্রাস্ট্রাকচার
এবং এতদিন আপনারা ছিলেন সায়েন্সের লোকেরা। আজকে সিইউইটির কারণে, যেই মুহূর্তে সিইউইটি শুরু হয়েছে, আর্টসের ছেলেমেয়েরা যারা কোনোদিন এই কথাটা বলেনি যে আমি দামি স্কুলে ভর্তি হব, আর্টসের ছেলেমেয়েরা এখন দামি স্কুলে গিয়ে ভর্তি হচ্ছে দিল্লিতে এই মুহূর্তে, কারণ আন্ডার গ্রাজুয়েট অ্যাডমিশনটা এখন স্ট্যান্ডার্ডাইজ টেস্টিং এ চলে গেছে। ওটা দামি স্কুল, মানে স্কুলে আপনি এনরোল, কিন্তু আপনি স্কুলে আপনার, হ্যাঁ, আর্টসের
আর্টসটা অ্যাকচুয়ালি এখন মনিটাইজড
হ্যাঁ,
হচ্ছে
arts এ
সায়েন্স অনেক আগে থেকে মনিটাইজ হয়ে গেছে
এবার arts কে তো করতে হবে।
স্যাক্রোনাইজড হচ্ছে
না, এবং এই
monetized
যে চেঞ্জ গুলো হয়েছে প্লাস হচ্ছে মানে এনইপি বলি বা আরো ইম্পর্টেন্ট যা যা চেঞ্জ মানে লেবার কোড আনা বা
একদম,
ইত্যাদি
একদম,
সেগুলো
একদম।
অলরেডি হয়ে থাকা কিছু জিনিস যেগুলো ভেতরে ভেতরে আন্ডারগোয়িং একটা প্রসেস চলছিল সেটাকে পলিসিগত ভাবে লিগালি সেটার
মান্যতা
একটা
দেওয়া,
মান্যতা দেওয়া এবং
লেবার কোডও তাই, আপনি শ্রম কোডটা বলুন, হ্যাঁ, প্রত্যেকটা জায়গাতে কিন্তু যেই জিনিসগুলো অলরেডি আন্ডারওয়ে, লোকে কোর্টে কেস করেছে, ঝগড়া চলছে, মারপিট চলছে, সেগুলোকে মান্যতা দেওয়া। এখানে এনইপির ক্ষেত্রে সবচেয়ে মজাটা বলি, আপনারা জানেন হয়তো দিল্লি ইউনিভার্সিটি ইজ অলরেডি এই মুহূর্তে আবার মানে এই নিয়ে আবার একটা রিস্ট্রাকচারিং হচ্ছে। আমি আবার যদি ওখানে থাকলাম এতদিনের মধ্যে আমার মাথাটা খারাপ হয়ে যেত। আমার এক প্রাক্তন সহকর্মী দেখলাম বিআরএস নিচ্ছেন, বললাম কেন নিলে? বলছে এভাবে টেকা সম্ভব না। মানে আবার একটা নতুন নিয়ে আসছে কি, দ্য নিউ 4 ইয়ার প্রোগ্রাম, যেটা আগে আন্দোলন করে তাড়ানো সেটা আবার ফিরে এসেছে। এবার সেখানে না ঝামেলা, আমি সেখানে যাব না। এই যে ব্যাপারটা, এবং যারা এখন বর্তমানে ক্ষমতায় তারা কিন্তু এটার বিরুদ্ধে আন্দোলন করেছিল। কিন্তু এটা ইট ডাজন্ট ম্যাটার, ওটা আনার দরকার। কারণ কিছু প্রাইভেট ইউনিভার্সিটিতে ইতিমধ্যেই 4 ইয়ার মডেলে লিবারাল আর্টস এর মতো ডিগ্রিজ পড়ানো হয়। অশোকাতে যেমন এটার খরচ 50 লক্ষ টাকা, হ্যাঁ লিবারাল আর্টস 50 লক্ষ টাকা। সেরকম আপনার এটা একটা আমেরিকার সাথে প্যারিটি আনা, সেই প্যারিটি আনার দরকার আছে কিনা সেটা আলাদা প্রশ্ন, কিন্তু আনা তার চতুর্থ বছর মানে আরেকটু বেশি খরচা।
প্রথমেই 4 ইয়ার সিস্টেম করার সময়ই বলেছিল যে ইউএস ওই গ্লোবাল
হ্যাঁ,
স্ট্যান্ডার্ড
কোয়েশ্চেনটা হচ্ছে যে ইউকে তো এখনো তো 3 বছর।
সেই।
হ্যাঁ, বলুন।
আমেরিকার সাথে যদি এরকম প্যারিটি আনার চেষ্টা হয়,
হ্যাঁ।
আমাদের পলিসি যদি
হ্যাঁ।
স্টুডেন্ট বা ছাত্রছাত্রী জেনারেল ছাত্রছাত্রীদের যদি উপভোক্তা বা কাস্টমার হিসেবে ধরে নিই,
হ্যাঁ।
তাহলে আমেরিকার কিছু প্রবলেমও তো আসুক, মানে এখানে শিপিং করতেই পারে।
করে গেছে।
যেমন স্টুডেন্ট লোনের প্রাইসিং, মানে 70 বছর বয়সের লোক
আপনি কি বাংলা পড়তে পারেন? আপনি বাঙালি নিশ্চয়ই বাংলায় পড়ছেন যখন। আজকে আনন্দবাজারটা খুলবেন, খেলার পাতার ঠিক আগে এনপিএ নিয়ে আজকে একটা প্রতিবেদন বেরিয়েছে। হ্যাঁ, সেখানে দেখবেন শিক্ষা লোনে এই মুহূর্তে নন পেয়েবল অ্যাসেটস কত তৈরি হচ্ছে।
আমার প্রশ্ন হচ্ছে আমাদের পলিসি যখন সেটা থেকে আমাদের ঠেলে দিচ্ছে, মানে সেটা থেকে মুক্তির কি কোনো পথ দেখাচ্ছে?
দেখুন আমি একটা
সেখানে আছে যে স্টুডেন্ট লোন কিভাবে ট্যাকল করা যাবে ন্যাশনাল,
না, কারণ আমরা তো শিক্ষা দেখুন স্টুডেন্ট লোন খুব ভালো জিনিস। স্টুডেন্ট লোন হচ্ছে ডেট স্লেভারি। আপনি 20,000 টাকা লোন নিলেন, আপনি তারপর 20,000 টাকা শোধ করলেন, তারপর আপনি দেখলেন আপনার এখনো 40,000 টাকা বাকি আছে। এই ডেট স্লেভারিতে আমি আপনাকে রেখে দিচ্ছি, এর মানে কি আপনি বাড়ি কিনতে পারবেন না, আপনি এরপরে আপনার জীবন করে কোনো প্ল্যানিং করতে পারবেন না। আমি এনশিওর করছি আমি আপনাকে চেঞ্জ করে রেখে দিয়েছি। হ্যাঁ, মানে এক ধরনের দাদন প্রথা, তাই না? তো এটা আধুনিক হোয়াইট কলার দাদন প্রথা, কিন্তু দাদন প্রথা না। আমরা কেন চাইবো না সেটা? আমরা তো চাই।
ভিডিও বন্ধ হয়ে যায়, আমরা ডিসকাশন চালাই যাবে। We can এমনি বলো না, so we can continue this discussion, but unfortunately we have to stop the video. So whoever is watching online, thank you for joining us, and we hope to see you in the next this kind of program. Thank you. We'll be shortly stopping the video, and we can discuss the offline. So, before stopping the video, I would like to give the vote of thanks. On behalf of ISI Research Scholars Forum, I would like to thank ISI CE Office, Electrical Maintenance Unit, Audio Visual Unit, Reprography Unit, State Office, Police Office, Security, CSSC, ISI Workers Organization, students, scholars, faculties, and volunteers, and of course our host speakers for making this program a success. We hope to arrange this kind of program again since the lockdown is over and there is the ISI is fully functional again. So we hope that we will be doing this program, and okay, so we'll be stopping the video here. Thank you.